Right now, I'm going to ask my colleague Mario Pedro to just show you that the father and the rest of the family members are still seated there, just trying to make sense of what happened last night. This fire broke out at around 9 in the evening, and they have still not received any kind of a trauma counseling. Now, obviously, as you can imagine, he is very distraught, together with the rest of the family members still seated there who haven't received any kind of trauma counseling. Now, just a few minutes ago, Jeremy, the community and the residents that were helping to put out the fire recovered the remains of the 4-year-old who was also tragically burnt to death last night. Now, I'm going to ask my colleague, as I'm walking, to show you that that foil right there is covering the remains of that 4-year-old boy who also tragically lost his life in that fire that broke out last night. Now, according to the residents, Jeremy, and some of the family members, the mother of the family, the 10-year-old as well as an 8-year-old, their remains were recovered last night. Now, this is the latest in terms of the bodies that have been recovered, which is this 4-year-old. Now, let me just turn to a resident here, Jeremy, who was helping to put out the fire last night. He was saying to us how difficult it was for the fire department to get here because the fire station close by here was burnt during a service delivery protest. As a result, the fire department had to move out of this area and they had to receive help from a neighboring community, which is Mitchell's Plain. But you were saying to us how difficult it was for you guys to put out the fire, and that this shack was a double-story shack and the fire broke out from the bottom.
Yeah, it was so difficult to see, to break down the fire, as it was the double story and the fire started on the lower level. It was so difficult because there was a burglar bar, and the burglar bar, it was so difficult to open it. And then we get a child, a firstborn of our neighbor. He told us that his mother and his siblings are on the upper level. So we tried to break down the fire, but we couldn't get it through there because the fire was so hectic, and then that's how we lost those siblings.
Now, you were saying the forensic team was here last night and they managed to recover the body of the mother, the 8-year-old and the 10-year-old.
Yes, it's true. They managed to get those 3 bodies, whereas we did have some suspicious things that there is someone there. As the first child of this guy told us that all of them were there inside the house. So the forensic was here, and then they only discovered those 3. And then we tried to ask them just to dig, maybe they can get the other child. But they say no, those are the only 3 people that they get there.
Now, before I let you go, how is the community doing? Because right now I can sense the sadness. It's quite palpable. Everyone is standing by and just looking at what's going to happen following this very tragic incident.
It's so sad. It's so sad to lose such a lot of people due to the carelessness of our communities. Because the reason for that, if those protesters of the new informal settlements they call Ramaphosa didn't burn down the Fezeka Fire Department, I'm quite sure most of these things couldn't happen. It's so sad, and I want to appeal to them for the next time when they having something like that they want to protest, they must just think about something that is helpful to us, because now the fire department moved from where it was closer to us to Mitchell's Plain, and it's another distance from Mitchell's Plain to come here. So at least they can just protest on the right way, not to destroy those things that we already have it.
Now, what do you think the cause of the fire was? Because the city has not yet determined it.
We are not sure yet, as when we comes out from our houses, we already saw the fire was burning, but it started on a lower level of the house, as it is a double story. So we're still trying to figure out what is the cause of it.
The cause of this fire, which led to the death of a mother, a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old, Jeremy, is not yet determined. The city is yet to, look into this matter. In fact, they've handed over this matter to the South African police, and we have seen some members of the South African police. They've also started to arrive. They've cordoned off this scene. It is now officially a crime scene. And again, Jeremy, so sad to see that the father is still sitting there, just trying to figure out, the loss that he has now just experienced. He has lost his wife. He has lost lost his 10-year-old son, 8-year-old daughter, as well as his 4-year-old son.
Athi, it's a heartbreaking story, and I'm not expecting you to have the answers to these questions, but I think these are questions that we need to put to the City of Cape Town. First of all, do we know when the Fazeka fire station burnt down? And perhaps more importantly, whether the City of Cape Town has implemented any alternative plan in this respect?
Well, at this stage, Jeremy, we cannot confirm when exactly that fire station was burnt, but according to the residents here, they're saying a newly built informal settlement which was then put down. Their structures were put down because obviously the land grabs in the Western Cape have been happening at such a fast pace that it's hard for even authorities to keep track. So those residents apparently were protesting and ended up setting alight that fire station, which has now put these residents at jeopardy of not being able to get the immediate and quick response from the fire department. This resident that I just spoke to saying that the fire trucks rather had to drive all the way from Mitchell's Plain, which is, like I said, a neighboring community outside this very informal settlement of Philippi in Browns Farm.
So, Athi, we then need to ask the City of Cape Town with a degree of urgency what its plans are to protect the community of Philippi.
Indeed, Jeremy, and not just that, to actually determine the cause of this fire. I've covered so many of these informal structure fires in the Western Cape, and throughout the reports we haven't really heard from them what the causes of the fires are. Their immediate response obviously is to say that they are investigating the matters. It was not so long ago, a couple of weeks ago, where I covered yet another shack fire, a 14-year-old. We arrived at the scene and they were also just recovering the remains and the bones of that 14-year-old, and we haven't heard from the city about the cause of that fire, and we're still yet to hear about the cause of this fire, Jeremy, so that they can appeal to residents to do exactly what they think might be causing the fire, so that people, for instance, some of these shack fires, residents tell us, comes from, say, a candle falling over or a stove that has been left unattended. So if maybe authorities can be clear about, after investigating this shack fire, being clear about what causes them, so they can appeal to residents not to do what might lead to this very deadly fires here in the Western